Hello and welcome back. As always, my name is Kelly, and 2024 has come and gone. So, as always, let's start off by talking about the worst things that happened. Specifically, just in film. Let's leave the rest of all of that for other videos and channels. I just want to talk about film. And all in all, wasn't nearly as bad of a year for film as it was for pretty much everything else. And I don't mean that in any kind of pedantic way. It genuinely felt like it was harder to write the worst list this year than it was the best, which in my book is a sign of a really good year for film. Now, that does mean that a lot of movies kind of hit more of the middle, I guess you could say, being mediocre, which to some is worse. Personally, I take it as that everything kind of raised their bar. They were at least trying for something good, even if they failed at it. And that's not to say there wasn't truly awful or so mediocre that they're absolutely terrible films. Trust me, we'll be talking about them in a minute. I'm just saying overall, it really did feel like everyone kind of brought their A game, minus a few notable exceptions. So even though we are going to be talking about the worst, I do just want to emphasize that 2024 did feel like it was trying to be a better year in film at least. But enough of that. As always, let's start off my list proper with the dishonorable mentions, which there are fewer of this year.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Mufasa, the Lion King. Yeah, the 2019 worst movie was The Lion King for me, but they're just doing the same trick twice, and frankly speaking, I can't give enough of a crap about it to put it higher. It's bad. We all know it's bad. Stop subjecting your kids to it. Hellboy, the Crooked Man. This is at least better than that other Hellboy movie, but for the love of God, if they're not going to do anything good with it, just give the rights back to Guillermo del Toro. Let him make Hellboy 3 already. We all know that's what's going to sell. The Watchers. I don't want to get too mad at this one, because at least I see a good-ish film in here, even if it kind of falls apart by the time we get about halfway to two-thirds of the way through the movie. Trust me, the Shyamalan family gave us a hell of a lot worse than this movie, which was just kind of bad. And with that very, very happy note, let's start this list proper with, of course, as always, number 11, Argyle. I am so sick to death of Matthew Vaughn trying to relive the glory days of Kingsman 1. I love Kingsman 1. I gave Kingsman 2 it could have been better, but I still enjoyed it. I bought it. But I'm so tired of him trying to remake Kingsman 1, whether it be The Kingsman or any of these other ones. He tries to tie into this weird universe thing, and they do not work. Argyle is the latest example of what I'm just sick of from this man. I get that there's some really good action here. I actually really like Sam Rockwell in this movie. But I can't get over the fact that I've seen this all before, and it was done better the first time. And here we are on attempt number 4, 5, 6? I've lost count at this point. This movie honestly wouldn't have been anything other than a dumb action flick and probably wouldn't have made this list if not for the fact that it kept trying to stack dumb twist over dumb twist over dumb twist over dumb twist as if Matthew Vaughn's trying to be the next M. Night Shyamalan. We already got 2 Shyamalan films this last year, one from him and one from his daughter, and neither one did as many twist endings as this film did. And unfortunately, that means the only thing that's memorable about this movie, other than the stupid twists, are just how bad it looks. The CGI is not integrated at all. It all looks like garbage. The worst of it was the stupid scene on the oil tanker where she's ice skating on a couple of knives strapped to her feet. Like, what the hell am I watching? Ice skating on oil. That's what I'm watching. And it looks like shit. It all looks like garbage. Matthew Vaughn just needs to get over his heyday and move on to something else. Because I do think he can make something good. But it's very clear that he needs to stay away from the spy genre for at least a decade. No more spy films, man. But of course, even with as many bad twists as there were in this movie, you can't outdo the master. Number 10. Trap. Yeah, this movie is pretty much the exact reason why I'm giving Watchers a break and only saying it's a dishonorable mention. The Watchers is kind of a first-time filmmaker trying their best at emulating a style, and they did a pretty good job until we found out about the Pixies. But The Watchers does not compare to Trap as far as just a movie that needs to learn when to stop. And like most Shyamalan films, Trap has an amazing premise to start with. The cat and mouse killer detective story, but from the killer's point of view as he's trying to get out of this trap that's got him, well, trapped. This is basically what Death Note did for 25 episodes, or hell, if you don't believe me, go rewatch Dexter. It's basically Dexter. Unfortunately, it's Dexter if M. Night Shyamalan directed it, which means a lot of really awkward shots, things that don't work, and way too much of his daughter pretending to be a pop star. I'm not saying her music was bad. I'm not even saying that the idea of her being the pop star on stage doing the concert was a bad one either. However, it is very, very clear that way too much of this movie, especially in its first hour, is dedicated to pointing the camera at her and basically doing glorified concert music videos for his daughter. And then there's kind of a killer in the background. And you know what? I'll be generous. I will be generous. I swear to God, I will be generous and say that that will be fine because the actual killer trying to get around all of the traps, trying to be charming and worm his way through security is actually a pretty good premise, and this film, while not doing it perfectly, did do it pretty well. And then they got out of the concert hall, and this movie takes a nosedive deeper than, well, Death Note did in this last 12 episodes. There's already a lot of questionable things you gotta put up with, just decisions that you have to kind of just roll with when you're going into a movie like this. However, after he gets out of this concert hall, everything that happens, every decision that's made, everything that transpires is just stacking the dumb on top of each other so big. I don't know how they didn't expect this Jenga tower to topple before we got even a half hour into this. It just kept going. Every single twist, every single reveal, everything just does not make sense, and it just keeps going. And Shyamalan proves that he really didn't have an idea for a movie. This was just a concert for his daughter. And unfortunately, I think that's just where Shyamalan's at. Like, love him or hate him, he just does what he's going to do. Whether it's just a really good premise he's going to run into the ground, really bad twists, or obvious nepotism, there's nothing else we can do. Shyamalan is going to be Shyamalan, and he'll just have to enjoy his place on everyone's worst list, I guess. Though there is one thing that can be said for all M. Night Shyamalan films, they're memorable. Unlike number 9, The Exorcism. Now, don't be like me and confuse this film with The Pope's Exorcism that came out the year before, because they're totally two different films, I think. I swear I think they are. No, they actually are two different films. And The Exorcism actually seems like it had an interesting idea to start with. It's a movie within a movie. They're filming a movie about an exorcism when an actual exorcism happens. Like, you can work with that. And that's kind of what they did with The Late Night with the Devil, which we will talk about in another video. But then after the exorcism actually happens, this movie just becomes every exorcism film you've ever seen. Rinse, cycle, repeat. Like, they do nothing new with it at all. Which kind of makes me wish that the first 20 minutes had just been, more generic. Then it wouldn't feel as disappointing, and it probably would have been a dishonorable mention at best. But it feels like they wasted an idea here, which makes it stick out more in my mind, and why I can't get over the fact that really the only thing that worked in this movie was Russell Crowe. But even then, you can tell that he's kind of just clocking in for a paycheck. Which sucks. I mean, he's still clocking into work, but it still sucks to see that this is where he's at right now. He tried way harder in Craven the Hunter than he did here, but at least he's still trying to give us a good performance because he is still an actor. I honestly don't know what else there is to say about this. It's just boring. It's just predictable. You know where it's going the second the possession actually starts happening, and they just play all the beats that you expect them to. I want something far more memorable. I wish more films would actually just go for broke. Go hard. Seriously, make this memorable. If you're gonna do a possession film, just swing for the fences. What's the worst? You're gonna miss? Well, guess what? If you don't swing, you end up like this. An exorcism so generic, you're not really sure if it's the other Russell Crowe exorcism film that came out within a year of each other. Number 8. Venom 3. The Last Dance. Spoilers right now, Kraven the Hunter will not be appearing on this list. Why is that? Because honestly, I think that movie's the only decent one of the entire Sony not Spider-Man movies. Don't get me wrong, I think it's kind of boring in some spots and it's way too long for its own good. However, it did give us some pretty good action, and I kind of liked some of the premise. It genuinely felt like it kind of worked a little, unlike all of these other films. Case in point, the Venom trilogy. I'm going to put it out there right now. I haven't liked any of these films. I think the only thing that really works in them is Tom Hardy, but he's not really playing Eddie Brock. He's playing just some guy he has a relationship with his voice in his head with. Other than that, the effects have all been garbage. The action scenes aren't really all that memorable, and probably the most interesting thing about this last one in particular is that it just went out of its way to retcon Spider-Man No Way Home, because he doesn't, vanish in the way that they showed at the end of that movie where he left a piece of the symbiote behind so that they could do the symbiote storyline in the MCU. And in fact, he just kind of gets yanked through a portal because I think they thought it would be funnier. And then we just get the random road trip movie where nothing really happens, and what does happen is pretty damn generic. The most interesting thing in this whole movie is when Venom is jumping from host to host. He's jumping into all these little other animals and kind of get venomified for a little bit before they jump somewhere else. That's it. That's the one interesting scene in the whole movie. Everything else that happens is pretty standard fare for what you'd see in any of these Venom films. Random CGI splooge Venom jumping around from person to person, doing weird things that I guess they can just do now. Check. Nonsensical plot with a villain that doesn't really have any presence in the movie. Triple check on that one. The bad guy, Null, is supposed to be like this big bad threat that the whole Marvel universe had a big epic storyline about. And we're not even fighting him in this movie. We're fighting his dogs. He is sitting on his chair in the void waiting for someone to unlock the door, and the only thing he can send are these stupid CGI blender dogs that when they eat a symbiote that shreds them into pieces, like that's somehow supposed to kill a symbiote. Burning them to ash, I can completely get. The sound waves that literally disrupt their molecules and cause them to fizzle out, I absolutely get. How does a blender actually affect these things when they can just mutate their body? There's no consistency with any of these symbiotes. None of the rules are established. They're all there because somebody thought it would look cool, but it doesn't because you didn't pay your CGI artists to make it look cool. They just kind of ran it through as fast as they could, which is par for the course for superhero films these days. I really wish that Marvel, both Disney and Sony, would actually pay their employees to do a good job, and instead they're going to throw them to the wayside and crap out some AI garbage. And unfortunately, this is the end of them. None of these Sony non-Spider-Man films did anything. Venom 1 made a bunch of money, but ultimately the films themselves did nothing. The best we got were a couple of memes out of 2 of them. Okay. Number 7. Borderlands. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be a worst list if we didn't have the crappy video game movie on here. Wait, didn't I say that in a previous video? Probably, because, frankly speaking, you get basically 2 types of adaptations. One, you get really good, faithful adaptations where people who worked on them genuinely cared about the source material and went out of their way to make sure to treat it as, basically as gospel. We've seen that with The Last of Us. We saw that with the Mario Bros. Movie. We've seen that come out where people can genuinely take these movies and these IPs and just put love into them. Unfortunately, we get the second one here because nobody cared in this movie. It's very clear that the entirety of this movie's budget went to hiring a bunch of A-list stars in roles they are massively miscast for, and hoping that you're going to go throw your money at it because they were in it. I don't know much about Borderlands. I've tried the first game, and I think I played a little bit more of the second one, but I never actually played through a Borderlands game. But even I can tell, this ain't Borderlands. It looks kind of like Borderlands in the same way that a bunch of people cosplaying at a convention look like Borderlands. But then you just put these 2 characters side by side, like Kevin Hart's character here, and you realize they're not even close. And when you see it like that, you can realize they're not really trying to. So what are they actually trying to make, if not Borderlands? Well, they're just trying to make Guardians of the Galaxy again. It's basically the exact same thing we saw with the Suicide Squad movie from 2015. A bunch of big names thrown into there. They're wearing the costumes that kind of look like it, but they're not really it. But even the 2015 Suicide Squad movie had more to it than this did. I will actually watch that movie. I will never watch Borderlands again. And I wouldn't recommend it to anybody. Everybody's miscast. Everyone's just throwing the generic lines that you can pretty much quote from heart by now. And third, it just looks like garbage. The CG on it is so bad. So much bad green screen inside of these studios where you think they would have perfected this by now. If they're not going to actually make a set, then at the very least, I should not be able to tell, me, non-film major, person who makes YouTube videos, should not be able to tell that that is green screen. If green screen looks better on Twitch and YouTube than it does your multi-million-dollar movie production, you have failed. See, Borderlands, if you're gonna be bad, go for broke. And be bad like this. Number 6. Megalopolis. How to describe Megalopolis? Well, I'll use my sister's words. This is pretentious cringe at its absolute worst. It is so far up its own ass that literally its own marketing is so far up its own ass. It just says flat out, ignore everyone who's going to say anything bad about it. So for those who don't know, the trailer that I saw in theaters, which got pulled from theaters, basically says, ignore all the hate. It goes through all of Francis Ford Coppola's films, like Godfather, and starts playing all of their bad reviews that happened at the time, even though all of these films are literally classics that are taught in film school today. But it was revealed they didn't actually use real movie quotes there. They AI generated a bunch of negative reviews, shoved them inside of a professionally edited trailer, and pushed that out to the masses because doing research is hard? Like, it's no secret that The Godfather was kind of reviled when it came out. People didn't like it until people saw it more than one time. So, those negative reviews do exist. Why were none of them used for the trailer? Probably because Francis Ford Coppola was too busy making his grand masterpiece to care about the marketing. I don't know. Genuinely, I could sit here and make jokes all day. And that's probably one of the reasons why, even though this is higher than Borderlands, I'm kind of smiling talking about it because Megalopolis is going to be remembered for all of the wrong reasons. And that's not the only pretentious thing about it. The movie itself is about this inventor guy who discovers this new material and he's going to make paradise. But the mayor, who's stuck in his old ways, a conservative, if you will, is stopping the progress of humanity. I think they kind of dropped that plot line about 45 minutes in and it kind of comes back at the end, but that's another issue with the movie. And I'm not saying this movie didn't have some good ideas that could have played into that. The idea that New York is new Rome and it's going to fall like old Rome actually kind of fits, even if it's not 100% well thought out or good. I like the idea of it, but you can just tell that Francis Ford Coppola was writing every single sentence as if he was writing a masterpiece, but never did any revisions to make sure that it actually worked. Oh, but that's just the pretension. Now we gotta get to the cringe, because nobody talks right in this movie. And if you've never seen the movie, all you really need to see is that one clip from the movie they put on YouTube where Adam Driver is just talking to this girl and telling her to get back in the club and leave him alone. And she just has to say, what? Like 6 times as he goes, yep, yep, yep. Was no one ever told to do a second take? The whole movie, people are talking like this. Nobody sounds right. No one finishes a sentence in a way that a normal human being would actually say that sentence. It's almost as if everyone just had their first takes and just ran with it. Or Francis Ford Coppola told them to, play it up. They're supposed to be indulgent. They're supposed to be decadent. So, of course, they're going to talk more grandiose and more over the top. So everyone turned it up to 11. Nobody was ever told to tone it down. And it is so painful to watch them all in this 11 space. It is just so cringe. It hurts sometimes. And other times it kind of works for like half a second, especially when you pair it with some of the visuals. Because if there's one aspect of this movie that Francis Ford Coppola did well, it's some of these visual sequences. And you kind of see there's a nugget of a good idea here. But it's just, again, wrapped in that pretentious cringe. And it's never allowed to be anything more than a novelty. This is one of those movies that might get a bit of a following later on, just because of the visual style of the film. It kind of works in that regard. It works in absolutely no other. But, at the very least, effort was put into this. And it is very memorable and fun to talk about, kind of painful to sit through. Unfortunately, this was the start of a 1-2 punch of bad back-to-back weeks. And the second film isn't nearly as much fun as to talk about. Number 5. Joker 2, Fully Ado. Oh boy. I'm going to say it right now. I did not want to hate this movie. I really didn't. When all of the initial buzz about it being a musical, or Lady Gaga, or even the negative reviews started coming in before I went and saw this movie, I did not want to hate this movie. Because truth be told, I wasn't the biggest fan of the first Joker movie. If you've watched my previous top 10 lists, I did put Joker 1 as number 10 on a list before, when it came out. But I even admitted then that it was a kind of a bad year, and it probably wouldn't have made my list in a better one. I felt the first Joker was just kind of overhyped. Really good filmmaking, had a lot to say about society's role in creating a Joker and how society fails people with mental illnesses. So even when all of the bad press and things started coming out about Joker 2, I was kind of on the board of just, it can't be that bad. People are just kind of overreacting. We see it all the time in the superhero space, especially with popular characters like the Joker or Batman or Superman or any of them. A sequel will never be as good as the original, blah, 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 blah. So I wanted to actually defend this movie. I really did. Unfortunately, this movie made every bad step it could possibly make at every junction it possibly could have made them. Joker 2 goes out of its way to piss on everybody who liked the first movie by almost undoing everything. It took all of the agency away from Arthur Fleck in the first movie and said, no, it totally wasn't him, guys. He's not really the Joker. No, the whole point of the first movie is that he finally frees himself when he chooses to go down this route. He is self-destructive quite literally to the extent of actually, literally lighting Gotham on fire at this point. But it was all Arthur Fleck. He chose to do that. But the movie here opens with a cartoon showing that, no, it was this shadow of his. It was never really him. And they just kind of layer more and more stuff on top of that, saying that it's all a fantasy, it wasn't real, and the Joker isn't anything at all. Harley Quinn isn't even anything. Sorry, not Harley. Lee Quinn. It's just Lee, because for some reason they couldn't call her Harley in this movie. Even she's basically a nothing burger, because they keep building her up. They keep, trying to do something with her where she's inserting herself and being evasive, almost kind of doing a flipped script on the normal Joker-Harley relationship, where Joker, takes her to the dark side, where she kind of encourages his dark side and actually kind of supersedes him and is controlling him from behind the scenes type thing, which is a decent idea. We've never seen that before, and probably worked really well with the ending. And trust me, we're going to talk about the ending. But it becomes a nothing burger when they basically just drop the whole plot line entirely. Even the musical aspect, which you got Lady Gaga for, who won an Oscar for another musical just a few years ago. The singing is actually directed to be bad. Why? Because Joaquin Phoenix can't sing. He can't. He hasn't been able to sing since Walk the Line. So now we have to tell Lady Gaga to phone it in, except for a couple of scenes where Arthur Fleck is instead dancing inside of a dream sequence, because all of the musicals are dream sequences. None of them are actually part of the movie. They're not integrated in. If you're going to do a musical, make a fucking musical. Go ham. It's the Joker. The Joker wouldn't half-ass this. Even if it is Arthur Fleck Joker, let him go big. Or at least go home. But they don't. And when they finally do drop the whole Harley plot line, it just feels like a giant waste of time. 2.5 hours of wasted time. And I will say this, even before we get to the final ending, there are ideas in this movie that just aren't fully explored. It is bad up until this point. But it is actually a watchable bad. It's stupid. It pisses all over the fans of the first. But at the very least, there's ideas here that just didn't work. And then we get to the ending. And this ending is probably the biggest fuck you I've ever seen in a film since The Dead Don't Die, when the actual director and writer monologues to the audience and tells all of us little zombies that we're destroying the art form that he works and crafts so much. Arthur Fleck is stabbed by some random person, and as the film zooms in on his dead, bleeding body, you see his stabber in the background carve the Heath Ledger smile, saying once and for all that Arthur Fleck was never the Joker. I can't even begin to list off the ways that this is the dumbest possible way you could have ended this movie. Not the least of which that it apparently came out, this was how the first movie was supposed to end? And thankfully, Christopher Nolan, or at least somebody at Warner Brothers, put the kibosh on that. But now that they're not actually working with Warner Bros. Anymore, they can do whatever they want. So they put it in this movie. And it's so bad. It's just so bad. And what's stupid is you could have kind of made it work if Harley was actually the force pulling on Arthur the entire time. Seriously, just have her stab him and then give someone else a smile and he's actually Arthur Fleck. This other person was a poser. And you kind of see the idea fully manifest here, right? And this ending just leaves such a bad taste in your mouth that you can't actually give this a good score. The only reason it's not higher on this list is probably because I didn't feel as burned by it because I didn't love the first Joker. If I had, this easily probably would have been my worst film because that's the level of fuck you to your audience I rarely see in film. Number 4. Tarot. I very fortunately did not actually see Tarot in theaters. I was planning on it, but something came up and I ended up having to cancel that week, and you know what? I'm very happy for it. Unfortunately, I'm not very happy because for this list, I had to turn it on streaming and I had to still watch it. I'm glad I didn't waste my money, but this is pretty much everything wrong with basically Blumhouse and just horror in general. All in all, 2024 was a damn good year for horror. We got a lot of really, really good films out of it. But Tarot is everything that those other films are basically scoffing at. It's just your standard MacGuffin summons monster to kill kids thing. There's basically no new element to it. It's just they play a tarot game and whatever card they picked is what kills them. And it kind of looked like they were doing something with the monster designs, but when you actually watch the film, the only one that looked even decent was the Jester. All the other ones are Halloween store costumes done with a little bit of extra leather to make them look scary. And of course, all of the characters inside of this are insufferable and you can't wait for them to die. Like, it's everything that you've hated about horror films. This is pretty much what Cabin in the Woods was scoffing at when they said how generic and rote all these films are. I honestly don't know what else there is to say. The only thing I'm really happy about is that I didn't see this in theaters. Unfortunately, we have to talk about the one I did see in theaters. Number 3. Night Swim. Oh my god, I still hate the fact that I was tricked into seeing this one in theaters. And to understand how I was tricked, I need to explain to you how marketing works. So in the horror genre, you'll see this especially, but it does happen in other places. But if a trailer really wants you to see a movie, they want you to think about all the positive things you think about another film and connect it to this one, you'll often see a bunch of, this film is produced by the same people that did Five Nights at Freddy's or Insidious, or insert any other horror film you've ever seen that you've actually liked. Now, the producers are not the ones who make those films. And in fact, there's 2 different types of producers. The first producer is basically like a set manager. They're usually there almost every single day, and they're just there to make sure everything is working, that the director has what he needs to shoot the film, that the actors are there on time. The producer is basically a set manager type person. He's just there to make sure the whole production runs smoothly. Then you have the second type of producer, the executive producer. They're just the people that sign the paychecks. They don't actually do anything with the film, and more often than not, when they say it's produced by so and such in the marketing, those are the people they're talking about. So the whole marketing thing about produced by is essentially a scam that marketers pull to try to get you to think positively about a film and go see it. Now, you might notice I'm not actually talking much about the film. There's a reason for that, because this movie is about a haunted swimming pool. There's nothing else to say. Going back to the marketing. Now, see, Night Swim did a very interesting thing inside of its marketing in that it said it was from James Wan. Now, normally when you see from inside of this, it implies writer-director, or writer-director and produced. That usually means that you have an auteur director who actually put their heart and soul into a project and made it work. And this is a pretty steadfast rule. You can go back and watch any of the trailers you want on any other horror film and see that it always stays that way. However, in Night Swim's case, James Wan is not a part of this production, even though the trailer clearly says, from James Wan. If you go over to the poster, it says, from James Wan, M.G.A, his production company. Not him. He had no part in this. I went and saw this movie and actually said that it couldn't possibly be all that bad because James Wan, a guy I know for a fact is really good at really abstract horror stuff like this, was attached to it, but he wasn't attached to it. It's just a movie about a haunted swimming pool. It's a haunted swimming pool. Just don't go in the swimming pool. There's one cool scene inside of it, and it's done better on the YouTube short that this was ripped from. It's just a haunted swimming pool. It is literally, you don't want to be haunted by the swimming pool? Don't get in the swimming pool. It's that simple. It's not a haunted house where you're stuck inside of it because that's where you live. It's a swimming pool outside. It has nothing to do with anything. It's a swimming pool. Calming down for a second, I will say that when watching this movie, I actually think that there was a way to make a haunted swimming pool work. And the way that you made it work was by making us think that it's not actually a haunted swimming pool. Take a Oculus route with the horror thing and actually make us question whether or not it's the pool or if it's just this guy going crazy because he's kind of sort of mentally ill and recovering from a sickness that pulled him out of his Major League Baseball career. And there's something to that. You could actually make something work with that. Unfortunately, they make it very clear that the pool is the thing doing it, because when they get in the pool, they see some CGI dust smoke shit go into the guy's nose and black out his eyes, making it very clear that this is a haunted swimming pool, and it's stupid. It's stupid. I hate the fact that it tricked me into going to see it, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. Moving on. I apologize, I kind of got heated there and ended up knocking my camera, so ignore the fact that things just moved on you. Now, before I talk about the last two, I'm just going to say this right now. Either of these movies could have made my top spot. I feel that the only thing that really differentiates them as far as quality of badness and everything was how much it kind of hurt me as a fan. I care far more about one of these than I do the other. And the one I don't care as much about is the one that made number 2. So, without further ado, number 2. The Crow, 2024. Now, as far as The Crow goes, I enjoyed the first movie, but I'm not exactly in love with it. I don't worship it. I think it's kind of a cool movie with a very tragic story attached to it. I personally just think The Crow is a good movie. The Crow 2024 is not a good movie. It is everything you see from bad reboots, where it's trying way too hard to be edgy, where it gives backstory to how he gets certain pieces of clothing like they're supposed to matter, and honestly completely misses the point of what the original Crow was supposed to be. Oh, but it's not a remake of The Crow. It's just readapting the source material. And you can tell that just by looking at it. You've seen all of this same shit before. It's just a darker, more gritty, more hot topic-y reboot of something that you've seen before. And that's all The Crow 2024 is. The acting is passable to just absolutely bad. The plot is pretty nonsensical. And one thing that does need to be said is that Eric Draven in the first movie really was a force for good, even though he was a spirit of vengeance. He did still try to help people. He tried to get them clean. He tried to actually be a positive force while killing the bad one. He was cutting out the cancer while promoting everything else to heal. Eric Draven in this kills so many people violently and pretty viciously for no other reason. Like, most of these guys are just bodyguards. Like, we're not supposed to think of henchmen as anything other than, part of the big whole, but Eric in this movie just goes out of his way to traumatize an entire auditorium by cutting off heads and throwing them at people for no other reason. Why? It doesn't help him get closer to the bad guys, and it just makes him look like an asshole. So as you can tell, the writing on this movie is pretty bad. Is there a positive I can say about the movie? Just one. And it's kind of the creative use of gore and violence. This movie was way more violent than the original one from, I think, 95. I can't remember specifically. I'll put it up here. But it does use that in kind of, sort of creative ways. Like, if the Crow can heal, he's got his sword stabbed through his chest because of fighting. So what does he do? He takes the guy and he literally just stabs him on the sword that stabbed through his chest. That kind of thing is actually creative. And in another film, I'd actually be applauding that. However, again, he's doing this to regular old Joes who have nothing to do with his quest for vengeance. So am I supposed to be happy about this? Like, if this was the big bad guy and that's how he kills him in the end, I'd applaud it. But it's not. It's just some henchman mook. And it just feels wrong. And I will just say this right now. It is staggering that Bill Skarsgård is on my worst list and my best list this year. And he's pretty high on that list too. We'll talk about that in the next video. But it is a weird dichotomy that this man is having right now. He's kind of saying yes to everything, like he's Nicolas Cage trying to pay back some bills, but he's still giving us Oscar-worthy performances while also Razzie-worthy ones. Like, I don't know what's going on through Bill Skarsgård's head, but at the same time, I'm kind of fascinated by that. And of course, we've got to finally talk about it. My number one pick, and you've already probably guessed it by now, because it came out this year and I completely forgot about that. Number 1. Madam Webb. This year was so fucking long that I genuinely forgot that this movie came out. I thought this came out last year. I am just kerfuffled. Like, literally, when I went through the Wikipedia list and firstrelease.com list of everything to see what I remember I saw and what came out this year, and I saw Madam Webb on there, I had like Vietnam-style flashbacks because, oh my god, this movie is so bad. Everything about it is bad. It has everything wrong with it that every film inside of this entire list does. Cringy-ass dialogue that doesn't make any sense. Bad costuming and really bad special effects. Performances that you have to just scoff at. No joke, the villain of this movie, every line he says is recorded in post. It is all ADR'd. He never said a single line on set that made it into this movie, and I am baffled as to the reason why. The story is nonsensical. It is the worst of these stupid Spider-Man, not Spider-Man Sony movies they keep like flushing out. This is the pinnacle of bad, and the only thing positive about it is that its own stars were shit-talking it while trying to promote it. Dakota Johnson, for the love of God, please fire whoever keeps putting you in roles inside of this. Your talent manager who keeps getting you these jobs, just fire them. You deserve better than this. There is absolutely nothing redeemable about this. The only good, positive thing that came out of this dumpster fire of a film were the memes. By God, this wasn't quite Morbius level, but it was still so many good memes that came out of it. And the reason that this is honestly worse than The Crow is because I love the superhero genre. I can defend so much inside of that genre. I will eat all of the slop. I actually will defend and say that the first Suicide Squad movie is worth watching. Even with its terrible editing, it's worth watching. I cannot and will not say anything in defense of this movie and the people who made it. And the CEO of Sony coming out and saying that, oh, we just didn't give it a chance, that it was all of us negative critics that ruined these babies and these marvelous movies and these stupid Sonyverse crap, is proof that the leadership in charge here are so out of touch that they do not understand that this is garbage. Or they don't care that it is garbage and they just expect us to eat it up. Either way, Madam Webb, you win. You're the worst film of 2024. I'm honestly tempted to go buy a Coke just to drink it on set, just to spite this film. And if you don't get that joke, this movie was basically funded by Pepsi, and there's a Pepsi can in almost every single scene. It's just a thing. Dakota Johnson can't even figure out how to open that can up either. It's kind of funny. And of course, that's my list for the worst films of 2024. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Let me know in those comments down below. Let's get some healthy discussion going. And of course, be sure to like, share, subscribe, all those things that make channel numbers go bigger so we can keep this going. And yep, that's it for me. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time in the best list.